Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Lion, the Way, and the War, where we discuss Jesus, His church, and the spiritual battle that surrounds us all. My name is Craig Allison, and I will be your host. All right, I'm very excited to have Dr. Kirk Brothers joining us today on the show. Dr. Brothers has been the president of Heritage Christian University since 2018, and prior to that position, he served as a professor at Freed-Hardeman University for about 8 years, if my research is correct. He has also served as the preaching minister at Gray Mare Church of Christ in Columbia, Tennessee, Central Church of Christ in McMinnville, Tennessee, Christian Chapel Church of Christ in Hatley, Mississippi. Yeah. Dr. Brothers obtained his PhD in leadership from the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary. He holds a Master's of Divinity from David Lipscomb University, a Master's of Arts in New Testament from Freed-Hardeman University, and a Bachelor of Arts from David Lipscomb University. Dr. Brothers has been extremely active, as we were just talking about, in global ministries, providing mission teaching in a lot of places. Looks like Israel, Ukraine, India, England, Brazil, Colombia, Peru, Honduras, Guatemala, El Salvador, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, Dominican Republic, and the Panama. Did I miss any?
Well, it doesn't matter. The Lord's let us go a lot of places. Yeah. I do a lot of work in Latin America, so all over Latin America right now.
Okay, good deal. And you've authored numerous articles and books. In particular, one of his books that we're going to be discussing today, Lead Like the Lord, Lessons in Leadership from Jesus. This is a fantastic book. I just got done reading it yesterday. And you've been married for 37 years. You've got 2 grown daughters. Dr. Brothers, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for allowing me to be here, and I'm glad that you were able to rest up and read my book, so you maybe got some sleep, maybe.
Yeah, I had one guy on a few seasons back. He had written a book, and I got it a week before the podcast, and I thought it was going to be about this size, honestly.
Yeah.
It was a tome. It was just like 800 pages, and so that was one that I really had to read quickly.
Yeah.
So, but I love to read.
Thanks for reading it.
It was like I said, I wasn't just trying to flatter you. It was a well-written. There's some books, some authors just hard to understand. And your writing style is just, it's easy to read. It makes sense. You don't have to go back and reread what you just read. So
I think the preaching helps because you're constantly thinking about how do I make this make sense to people?
Yeah, right. So. Yeah. So we're gonna focus. I've got questions I want to ask you about the book, but before that, I need to disclose to you, as I was doing just some final stalking on you today, I ran across something vastly interesting. It caught me by surprise, honestly. It caught me by surprise because I was not expecting to be so entertained by this. But on your one of your social media pages, I'm not going to say which one, I learned that you're into bees, pretty substantially into bees. And I watched a video that you'd posted on YouTube that was a removal of a beehive from this lady's house. Yeah. So it was a long video, and I was expecting to just like maybe catch the first 2 minutes and then be like, okay, yawn fest. I was so engrossed in that silly video of you cutting out.
You're waiting to see if I was going to die or not. What happens when 2 preachers cut a hole in someone's roof? Okay.
Right. So, and then I was like, well, I was kind of wanting to see like what happened to the hole in the roof. Like, did that get fixed for her?
Yes, and so in fact that was part of it. I had never done they call that a cutout, and there are some beekeepers that's a part of what they do. I know. I remember one I used to watch his show. He used to be a carpenter, and then he got into beekeeping, and so he found that married well together because if you're getting them out of somebody's house, he could tear it apart and put it back together.
Okay, yeah.
So I told her we had to first of all figure out where they were, and once I realized they were somewhere we could get to, because she had a 2-story house, and you saw in the video, I said, I can get to them. I know where they are. It's in between the joints or the rafters, so that I can get to them, but I said, I'm going to cut a hole in your roof.
And you had wires there to deal with too that are not normally resting on
electrical wires. Yeah, normally, like we were prepared. My friend is a preacher. Chris Miller preaches at the Hatton Congregation, and he also does pools. So he does a lot of plumbing. So he knew plumbing well. Yeah. So he was totally expecting that stuff to be up
Yeah.
closer to the bottom of the floor. So usually in a situation like that, you can cut just slightly through the ceiling drywall,
Yeah.
and you're pretty safe not to run into anything, as long as you don't go deep.
Right, right.
Well, everything was right against the
right
ceiling,
there,
so it was an adventure, and we got them out. But we told her going in, hey, we're not professionals, we're not charging, we're just trying to help. It was a lady, her husband had died about 3 years ago. An elder at a local congregation said she's got these bees, she doesn't have anybody to help her get them out. The pesticide companies can't go in there because they can't legally kill them. And so, that was an issue for her. So that it's not like somebody can come in and just spray something and kill them.
Right.
And, of course, I wanted to try to save the bees as well, but she just didn't have anywhere to turn. And I says, as long as you understand I'm not a professional and that you're going to need someone to put the ceiling back in. I've done drywall work like on a wall.
She had popcorn ceiling, though. That's hard to match up.
Yeah, there's no way I'm going to tackle somebody's ceiling, especially a popcorn ceiling. But no, she had somebody, in fact, the elder who recommended or asked, said, would you please go help her? Yeah. He said, I've got somebody that I trust.
Oh, nice.
And so we ended up, the preacher with me, he got a friend of his to do some plumbing work. And so, I think it worked out. She called me reached out to me about a month ago and said, is it safe to close it up? I asked her to leave it open for a while to let everything dry out and to make sure we got them all out. And she was ready to go back to entertaining, and so she can. So anyway, they're out of there, and they're residing in my backyard. And
you get honey from those bees?
I will sometime. I won't this year. Anytime you have a new colony, even if it's an existing, because there were tens of thousands of bees, and we recovered about 80% of them.
You got the queen. I saw that.
We got the queen, and I checked on her about a week ago. She's doing fine. She's laying, so she's doing well. So I won't pull any honey from them until next spring.
You have other hives there that you do?
I have 3 right now. The most I had was 12 during COVID. When I was actually home in the evening, I caught 5 swarms, and I would just come home at night. I was working every day, but I wasn't on the road. And so when you're home, you can split and that. But since then, once I went back to traveling, I'm gone half the time. And so they kind of dwindle down.
Yeah. So how does a preacher and a university president get involved in beekeeping?
When we moved...
Like, do you just love honey that much? Or?
Well, I do like honey. When we moved to work with Heritage Christian, we wanted a place kind of out. And, of course... we found that if we didn't go into Florence, there's a big property value. Of course, I can't say anything. In Chattanooga, I imagine, it's $1 million for 2 square feet. Yeah. But if you went out of the city, you could find land affordable. And so we found 8 acres in Killen that had been on the market a year and a half. The couple wanted to move it, and so we got it. We liked having a little room because much of my life is around people. Mm-hmm. I like having somewhere where me and the dog can just go for a walk and chill. And so we were talking about having this land and said, what are some ways we might use it? So we talked about, sheep, goats, cattle, all that. And as we're tossing these ideas out, Cindy goes, that I would be the one taking care of all of them because you're never going to be here. And somewhere along the way, we got to talking about beekeeping. Actually, we went on a fundraising trip to Texas and stopped in Waco. My wife's a big Fixer-Upper fan back in the day. I can't tell you the last time she's watched it, but once upon a time, she was a big fan. Yeah. And we went into their restaurant, and their gift shop had a beekeeper's Bible.
This is Chip and Joanne Gaines.
Chip and Joanne Gaines.
Yeah, I figured that's it.
And so we got there. I bought it because we'd been talking a little bit about it, and Cindy enjoys fruit and flowers and all those kinds of things. And we thought, hey, man, that might be fun. We already had some blueberry bushes on the property and blackberries and stuff like that. And anyway, for my birthday, she got me. We live really close to several Amish settlements, and so she went up and bought hives. Bought a full hive from an Amish beekeeper, and I literally got online and ordered some bees from Georgia, from Barnyard Bees in Chatsworth.
Yep, right down the road from where I live.
Yes, I've been to Chatsworth several times, dropping in. They've got a big new store there now.
Yeah.
Been out to Dave's place once, I guess it was, but most of the time bought stuff at the store.
Okay.
But anyway, he sent me bees in the mail. Literally, I picked them up at the post office, and I remember going to get them, and it comes in a box, and it's got wire mesh on the side so that it's got airflow, and they have a can of sugar water that hangs in the middle. They've got the queen in a little bitty cage, and she's got sugar candy in there, and she's got some worker bees with her, and so she's separate from the rest of the bees. Normally, when you buy a package like that, the queen and the worker bees don't necessarily come from the same colony. They just stick a queen in there, they put a bunch of bees in there.
Okay.
But basically, during transit to your house, they smell each other because there's wire mesh separating them, so they touch smell.
Okay.
And anyway, they just have it's just a can like you would buy beans in, except there's no paper markings on it. It's just a can, and they'll have little bitty holes in it, so it just very slowly oozes sugar water. So the bees have something to eat in transit and airflow, and usually as long as it can get there within 4 or 5 days, and it's not in a situation where it's just killer hot.
Yeah.
Heat is bad news for them.
Yeah.
Then they do okay. And so I remember picking them up at the post office, and I asked them, "Do you get many bees in the mail?" And she's like, "Yeah, this just happens from time to time," because there are several beekeepers in our area. So you got a process by which you put them in your hive, and so that was my first hive. My first queen, I named her Galadriel. She was an amazing queen.
I'm extremely fascinated and interested in this, and we could probably spend the rest of the podcast talking about this. I do have one other question though. Is like, do you work bees into your sermons or lessons or teaching instructions? Because they are fascinating creatures.
I'd never thought when I got into it. I will tell you that we serve an awesome God. And I have learned more from a half-inch creature about God than probably most anything else in my life. It is amazing what God built into them.
Yeah.
Memory, they have memories. They can remember faces. They don't live long. So, the new members of the colony have to relearn things, but they know colors. They recognize colors. It's phenomenal. I won't go into all of the things that God built into them. So, first of all, I've just been astounded. And I've got one researcher, I read a lot of his stuff, and it just blows my mind that he is an atheist, because I'm thinking, how can you do what you do and not at least be open to the fact that there is a brilliant mind that made this creature.
Yeah.
That you don't get this built into a creature just by accident.
Yeah.
And so that's the first thing. It was like watching the wisdom of God happening in a little bitty creature.
Wow. Yeah.
The other thing is, I never dreamed I would get any sermon illustrations, but I've ended up with tons. And so I've got several. One of the things when I go back to teaching here in about a year as a full-time professor, I've got several book projects that I'm working on. I'm working on a book on homiletics now and several book projects. But I've had several talk to me about doing projects connecting bees to the Bible. You've got a bunch of bee stories in the Bible.
Yeah.
In fact, devotional book wanted me to write on Samson, and so you've got some amazing stories of Samson and bees, and you start looking at, as a beekeeper, the size of the cavity in the lion.
Yeah.
What is a swarm, because that would have been a swarm that moved in there.
Yeah.
They were in a cavity. A colony would have been in a cavity. They ran out of room, and so they go into the process of bees are natural church planters, and so they're just built to church plant, if you will. Once they run out of room, they will start exercising the queen. They literally start poking the queen so she'll walk, because they need to walk poundage off of her. She's only flown on her mating flight, and then she's been working. And so she eats, and she can lay up to 1,500 eggs a day. So she's been doing that, and so she's gaining weight. And so when they need to swarm, it's the older queen that swarms. So they've got to get her in flying shape, and so they begin to start transforming some of the eggs into queen cells, they build queen cells in the colony. The queen cells look like you took the shell of a peanut and stuck it on the bottom of the frame. So when you're going through them, you're like, oh, they're about to swarm, because you'll start seeing all these little peanuts so forth. But anyway, they would swarm, and they're looking for a new home. So some of the forager bees will convert to scout bees, and they're not looking for food. They're now looking for homes. Yeah. And they're certain, they want at least a 10-gallon cavity, and There's a certain size to even the entrance. They don't want it to be too big and too small. If it's too big, they can't defend it, etc. So there are certain things they look for. A guy named Thomas Seeley has done a lot of research with Cambridge, etc., on the swarming habits of bees. A book that you would find fascinating as a leader is a book called The Honeybee Democracy. He looks at his research, how bees make decisions in a swarm process. And so it walks through that whole process of how they work to make decisions. And the role of the queen in the hive. The queen's not the leader of the hive, but the whole hive still rotates around her. And so anyway, probably what happened in Samson finding, the lion with the carcass is you had a colony that ran out of room wherever it was living and swarmed. And usually about half the colony, anywhere from 40 to 60, will leave with the older queen. And they can convert any egg into a new queen. And so they'll start, what they do is they feed all of the young larvae. On day 3 is when the larvae hatch out of the eggs, and they all get royal jelly. But if it's going to be a queen, she keeps getting the royal jelly. And so they just feed them differently to create a queen. And so they'll start creating queen cells and raising queens. And the way that'll happen is they may do 8 or 10 queen cells in the colony that's left behind, the half that stayed home, and first one out wins. And literally she will come out and she will start calling. They will answer. She'll go to the call and kill them. And so first one out gets to be queen, and she tries to kill everybody else. So they're beautiful, but they're brutal. Yeah. But then you have the older queen. She will swarm, and her scout bees will look for a new location. So it may be some of our listeners have been somewhere and they've seen a big swarm of bees hanging on a tree. Well, what happens is when they leave, that queen's only flown one other time in her life. Odds are. Now, some, once they start swarming, they're more apt to swarm again. Yeah. But if it's her first swarm, she's only flown one other time on her mating flight. So she's just tired. Yeah. And so I remember one time I caught 3 or 4 swarms from literally the same bush, because they would come out of the front of the hive, they would fly to the first thing they could land on and rest. And they may stay there 24 hours. She's just catching her breath. And so it's almost like it was a practice flight. But they flew there, they'll all gather around her, and the scout bees will keep looking. And the scout bees will be bringing back message. So you've got scouts going to multiple homes, and they'll come back and they'll do a dance advertising their home if it meets the specifications. It's big enough, the entrance is the right hive size, maybe if it's far enough off the ground, although they will actually move in places on the ground, but they prefer to be about 20 feet up. Yeah. And so they'll communicate that, and then other bees will try it until they kind of come to a consensus of which one they think is the best one. And then that group, usually within 24 hours, somebody told me the other day they had one in their yard that was there 48 hours, stayed 2 full days. That's not normal to stay there that long.
They're being very sure about where they wanted to go.
Yeah,
right?
That's right. Yeah. So there's some confusion or tired weather can impact all of that, whether they can leave and that kind of stuff. I've had swarms I found with a storm coming, and I had to kind of get them in a box as fast as I could because this really bad storm was coming. If they're out and unprotected, they're actually better off in a tree. I caught one on the ground one time, and it's pretty rough on them because there's nothing to protect them. Does that make sense? If they're in a tree, they at least have the branches and stuff above them, and they can weather the storm better. So like in that story of Samson, that old queen probably with her swarm, there's a lion. You got the chest cavity. Yep. And it's about the right size of what they're looking for. And so they just move in there, and it works. And they start making comb, probably hanging on one side of the rib cage. And you've got,
fascinating.
You got the skin of the lion. It's going to probably stay. It'd be one of the last things to rot. Does that make sense? Because you think of all people make out of animal skin. So, I can totally see how that could happen. Yeah. Because in that region, there's not tons of other options. They're going to don't have, like you think about even Jesus being a carpenter. The word for carpenter can refer to carpentry and stonemasonry. And in ancient Israel, they would have had more wood available in the Old Testament than in the New Testament. But you notice often they had to go get wood from Lebanon, the cedars of Lebanon. Right. But they had a lot more rock than wood. So Jesus probably worked a lot more in stone than he did in wood. Yeah. So I'm just saying in that culture, they'll literally move in anywhere they can. if they can't find, because you not only have to have a tree, you have to have a tree with a cavity that's a big enough size.
Yeah.
So they may not have had, they swarm, they don't have tons of options. There's a carcass of a lion, that works.
Let's go there.
Anyway, I could totally see that happening. So
Yeah.
at some point I want to do, Bees and Believers, where I talk about stories in the Bible that relate to bees and honey. And I do think there are a lot of illustrations for leadership that relate to how bees work.
Yeah.
For example, I was actually talking to somebody the other day. Your bees that are aggressive and sting a lot, they produce a lot more honey. Okay, so I got into an Africanized beehive in Panama one time. I was there teaching at the school and had some of our students with us. So I went out. They have a hive there. We didn't know that their gentle hive had been taken over by an Africanized bee colony. So when I went to check on them, they lit me up. And I just had a hood on and a long sleeve shirt and nitrile gloves, which is often what I would use. I had been in those bees before. I'd actually cut them out of a tree. I worked in them all day, and we had a chainsaw, and I got stung once because I accidentally squished one between my fingers just trying to get the comb and stuff out of the inside of the hollow of that tree. The tree had fallen, and we were trying to cut them out. So they were unbelievably gentle. So all I showed up with is just hood over my head, a T-shirt, a long-sleeve T-shirt, and nitrile gloves, and I thought, they'll be fine. Went in the middle of the day, so all your foragers out, and you kind of do all the things that you do as a beekeeper. Don't go when it's raining, don't go in the morning, don't go when it's cold, and all that kind of stuff. Man, they wore me out. And with Africanized bees, they will follow you and they will chase people. But then once they go after you, they start going after everybody. And so I think I counted 85 stings that time.
Goodness.
And so, but what you find is Africanized are just. And we don't really have Africanized bees here. In Latin America, they would have it a lot more. A lot of their hives are mixed, so you'll have, they may have Africanized blood in the line, but they may not be fully Africanized. They're just more aggressive.
Yeah.
So like the bees that are at the Bible school now are more aggressive than my bees. They're not dangerous. They're just more aggressive, but they produce more honey. Mm. And so I've often talked about it. Sometimes it can be like that with employees. It can be like that with church members.
Yeah.
That you have that church member that's just grumpy, but oddly enough, sometimes that grumpy employee may be your hardest
most
working, productive.
Yeah.
And so part of leadership is balancing the stings and the honey. Yeah. And when the stings outweigh the honey, then you have to go a different direction.
So you're already in your book that you haven't written yet. It's let's do 52 devotionals on bees and Christianity and leadership. Yeah. So let's talk about your book.
All right.
So there's this, for the listeners, just kind of, I'm going to try to summarize real briefly. This book is about a Christ-centered approach to leadership, and you do that by examining really how Jesus led during his ministry here on earth, as opposed to the worldly styles of leadership that we see today that focus on power and prestige and oftentimes control. So it's a book about a servant leadership approach. And you challenge the reader to align their leadership with the character and the mission of Jesus. So that's the 30-second, really high altitude synopsis of your book. So I wanted you to speak specifically to what it means to be a servant leader, and how does that challenge our current leadership models?
Well, so for me, the journey, when I was in grad school reading, you're exposed because the nature of my degree was in leadership. I'm reading all kinds of things on leadership. And most of it is research-based. And when you see study after study saying this is a good characteristic, this is a negative characteristic, because Hitler was a leader, and he moved and motivated people. He just wasn't a spiritual leader with positive spiritual attributes.
Right.
But when you look at the positive attributes, I kept saying, I've seen that before. And so I began to think about, I do believe the Bible is the best book on leadership ever written. There are so many stories, examples, and principles. But I just decided to do a deep dive into Jesus as a leader. And it was fascinating to read the Bible just looking for him as a leader. It was just it was just interesting. I enjoyed the process of thinking about him as a leader. And so for Jesus, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. John describes the pre-incarnate Jesus as the Logos. Mm-hmm. And he literally says, without him was nothing made that was made.
Yeah.
You think about in the garden when he talks about legions and legions of angels that he could have called. We're talking about the Creator, the all-powerful Creator of the universe, who even as a human being could walk on water and raise the dead.
Yeah.
Yet we find him with a towel wrapped around his waist.
Right.
And he talked about the Gentiles who lord it over, but he said, you did not so learn in me.
Yeah.
I am among you, and one of his phrases is, I am among you as one who serves. And so, did he have authority? Yes. There were times when he rebuked his followers, he turns to Peter and says, get behind me, Satan. He could command the storms. He could command demons to come out of people. So when he needed to exercise authority, it's not like he was timid. You know, being a Christ-like servant doesn't mean I'm timid and walked on by everybody.
Right.
It just means that when my approach is, I'm going to do what's best for you, but that's always going to be subservient to what's best for the kingdom. Mm-hmm. It's not about me as a leader. For him, it was all about the kingdom, and he brings that out a lot in John.
Yeah.
I'm here on Father business. We're used to that phrase from Luke 2. So for me, servant leadership is an others focus, but from a biblical perspective, it's a kingdom focus instead of a me focus.
Yeah, he was very mission minded. That
Yeah, and the clarity of that's why I start out when I look at his characteristics with the idea that he's centered, mm-hmm. that he was focused, because everybody had a plan for him. And that's one of the challenges as a leader. Everybody has a plan for you. Mm-hmm. And so, like, if you think about it, Heritage Christian, there are lots of different opinions on what a president at Heritage Christian ought to be doing and how they should go about their job.
Right.
It's like that in any positions, whether you're a preacher or a youth minister. I've often said, when you go to a congregation, make sure you get a job description, mm-hmm. because if you don't have one, then you have as many as there are members of your congregation. Yep. If you don't clarify it and the elders don't communicate that to the members. Even if the elders have one, if they don't communicate it, they're all creating their own in their minds. Yeah. So Peter had a plan for Jesus. The devil had a plan for Jesus. The general populace had a plan for Jesus. The religious leaders had a plan for Jesus. Even his own mother had a plan. Mm-hmm. And so what was powerful about Jesus is he had absolute clarity, I think starting with age 12 when he says, I'm here on Father business. Yep. He had clarity about what he was doing. Much of leadership is not choosing between good and bad, it's choosing between better and best. And so because Jesus had clarity not only on his general purpose to seek and save the lost, but he had priorities within that and was able. So sometimes he stops healing people, like in Luke 4, so he can go preach to another village because he had priorities. He understood, yes, there's value in healing someone, but it's more valuable for them to know about how to enter the kingdom of God. I'm here to proclaim the kingdom. So that centered focus on what is the will of the Father.
You know, okay, so this is, as I'm sitting here listening to you, Dr. Brothers, this is the part where you've said something that's really piqued my curiosity, so I don't have this as a prepared question for you. Right. But just talking about, he had this absolute clarity. He was on the Father's. It was you know, what does the Father want? This is, you know, I'm on this trajectory, and you're not going to pull me off of it because I know what's best. Mm-hmm. Then you've got that moment, and I've always wondered about this because it strikes deep to me when he's in the garden, mm-hmm. and he's about to be arrested, and he's clearly in a state of emotional turmoil and distress, and even so much so that there's this like, okay, hang on just a second. Mm-hmm. Is there another way to do this? You know, and pleading to, you know, if there's another way, let this cup pass. That's the only instance I can think of in his entire mission that there's a pause, and let's find maybe just find another way.
Is there
to do
another
this.
way to do this?
Is there another way to do this?
And I don't guess I view that as, well, let's just don't save these people.
Yeah.
Is there a way to do this that
Another path that achieves the same goal, but we're going to do it a little bit different.
And it's a reminder, that he became a human being. I just did a sermon a couple of weeks ago called The Trust, where I look at Mary and Joseph. And that if Jesus truly became a human being, that meant when he was born and laid in that feeding trough, he knew what every other baby born and laid in a feeding trough knew. He didn't know calculus. Mm-hmm. If he truly became human and emptied himself, I'm not saying in his essence he wasn't God, even as a human. You've got Thomas calling him my Lord and my God. You've got the blind man bowing to him in chapter 9. He's equal to God, but he clearly emptied himself because Luke 2:52 says he increased in wisdom. You would never say that of the eternal Logos, that he needed to know more.
Right.
And so if he truly became a human being, he literally had to rediscover who he is. That some emptying of knowledge took place based on what Luke 2 says. Yeah. And so you've got this interplay of the Holy Spirit, the local synagogue and what he would have read about prophecies of the coming Messiah. The role of Mary and Joseph would have been huge, and that's one of the things I talk about is that, God entrusted them to helping him rediscover who he was. And so you've got this juxtaposition. You've got key moments at age 12. It's like, okay, I get it.
Yeah.
When she says, your father and I have been looking for you, and he says, don't you know, and you don't have the word business or church there, house, it just literally says and you got the article, the of my father. I'm here on what is of my father, the things of my father. So, and he's not talking about Joseph. He's not talking about his adopted father.
Right.
He's talking about his father in heaven.
Right.
And then you have his ministry begins where God says, this is my son. You have the sign of the Son, which is the coming of the Spirit, according to John 1. And then you have the statement that he's the Son. And then immediately after that, in chapter 4, 2 of the 3 temptations begin with, if you're the Son of God. Yeah. Now, I don't believe Satan is wondering if he's the Son of God. James says the demons believe and tremble. I don't think it's prove to me you're the Son of God. Right. Okay, if you're the Son of God, what are you going to do here on earth? Right. What kind of king of the Jews are you going to be? What kind of... And so he has to wrestle with his mission, and a part of that is he gets to choose, it looks like, he's at least offered a crown of gold over a crown of thorns. Because he's a king, and he's going to be a king. Yeah. But if he takes one path, the God's path, he has to wear a crown of thorns before he wears a crown of gold. Mm-hmm. If he takes Satan's path, he gets the crown of gold right now. And so he chooses the crown of thorns in Luke 4. But then you move to the end of his ministry. Mm-hmm. And it's one thing 3 years removed. I always say Jesus was cursed with foresight. Yeah. I don't want to know when I'm going to die. I mean, I would like 10 minutes so I can say bye to everybody. Right, but if you knew you were going to die in a horrible way, 3 years from now, I don't have any desire to know that. He knew what was coming. At what point did he get all of that? I don't know. I just knew he knew it in advance. But then when you're there at the doorstep and you're within 24 hours of it.
The reality of it,
he's still a human being at the end of the day. Yeah. And he's still wrestling with human emotions. And the Jesus in that garden who hadn't slept, who's had this weight, while all his friends, he's sitting at supper, he knows what they don't know. He tries to tell them, they don't get it. Yeah. That all comes down and says, Lord, he's minutes away from people who used to hear him in the temple coming to arrest him, mock him, and it's going to be brutal. He knows every first century Jew that lived anywhere around Jerusalem has seen a crucifixion before. Yeah. You've seen them lining the streets as you come into the city. He knew the embarrassment. I mean, the awful things they do to a crucified person. Literally, they're doing everything they can to shame them in the greatest way possible. Yeah. That's going to be done to him. And when you know you've got 12 legions of angels, you just think about it. Just a thought, a twitch, and angels. I always, in my mind, I'm a visual thinker.
Yeah.
So when he's there in the garden, here's what I'm envisioning. I'm envisioning row after row after row of angelic beings on these mighty steeds in full battle array, and the war horses are snorting and it's boiling out of their nostrils, and they're just like, call us.
Yeah.
How dare they do this to the Logos?
Right.
I know there's no biblical picture of that, but that's the picture I see in my head.
Yeah.
And how easy it would have been to call them. He just has to think it. He doesn't even have to speak it.
Yeah.
And they come swooping out of the sky, and he never hurts.
Well, the fact that he could have done that, and he was still human, to your point. So he suffered with the human frailties and the emotions, so much so that he's, Luke records that he's sweating drops, the hemoketosis, I think is how you say it, or whatever word. The pressure is just so intense and so great that your capillaries right under the skin are, popping open. Yet he does the will of his Father still. He comes back to that, and he follows through.
He could have had 10,000. He got one.
Yeah.
But the text says an angel was sent to comfort him.
Yeah.
So there weren't 10,000 to deliver him. There was just one to try to give him the strength to go through what was going to happen in the next 16 to 18 hours.
Yeah. What does that? So, we're kind of off topic, but maybe not, because what does that demonstrate about Jesus' leadership at that point?
Well, I think it goes back, again, it's not the first chapter in the book, it's the third chapter in the book, but the first of the characteristics is that he's centered. Mm-hmm. Even with all of that pressure, he didn't leave his mission. Even as he wrestles with that, the emotion is unbelievable. There would have been I can't begin to imagine what it was like. And he's saying, Father, if there's any other way. I'm right where I was back in Luke 2. Mm-hmm. I'm still on your business. So if there's not another way, your will wins. Yeah. And so that he didn't, even in his darkest hour, he didn't leave his purpose.
Yeah.
And that's what leaders, there will be dark moments. I've never had a moment like Jesus did. But in my dark moments, Jesus reminds me, stay on focus.
Yeah.
There'll be times as a leader you make tough decisions, you're trying to do the right thing, folks will disagree with you, but you have to keep asking yourself, like as I think about heritage, as when I get to the end of the day, did I try to make decisions today that honored God, and did I stay on the mission of Heritage Christian University? Mm-hmm. We like to say making ministers is our ministry. So was it on focus, and did it honor God? If I feel like at the end of the day, all decisions today fit our mission, and I was trying to honor God with a decision, then I can live with it, whether anybody else likes it or not.
Yeah.
Jesus stayed on focus. You think about just go back to that focus, even on the cross. You have in Luke's account, I want to say it's in chapter 23 of Luke, where you have multiple people at the cross saying, if you are the King of the Jews, if you are the Christ. And every one of the phrases or lines that follow the if statement, you have the if-then statement, then save yourself.
Yeah.
Come off this cross, save yourself and us. Well, ironically, they're saying if you're the Messiah, save yourself, or in the case of the criminals on crosses beside him, save yourself and us. Mm-hmm. But the reality is, if he stays on the purpose of the Messiah,
that's what happens.
He's there to save them, not himself. If he does what they say you have to do to prove you're the Messiah, he actually proves he's not the Messiah.
Yeah. And
so leaders have to stay focused on that, if that makes sense. Yep. And I just think that's huge. And one of the chapters talks about his courageous calmness, that in the world of military, great military leaders have the ability to calmly make decisions as people are dying, bullets are flying, and explosions are all around them. Jesus had this amazing ability to courageously face what was in front of him. Though there are times, like in the garden, when it's obvious he's struggling. Every leader has to be courageous.
Yeah.
Have a sense of your purpose and just say, as long as what I'm doing is okay with God, it doesn't matter if I'm alone. You think about Moses. There were times in his career as a leader. That's why I end the book with saying, how do you define the success? Mm-hmm. There are times you can look at Moses, because sometimes folks will say, well, you're not a leader if no one follows. I disagree with that. Because Moses was a great leader, but there were times when nobody followed.
So, I again, you've made me think about something here with going back to the garden, and he would like to find another way if it's possible, but then he sticks to the mission. He sticks to the course. You mentioned that had he come off the cross, that mission it would have failed, because basically if he gets off the cross, he sacrifices himself for mankind, and so that's the mission, to save the world and to reconcile our broken relationship with God. But then there's that moment while he's on the cross, he's carrying out the mission. He's at the point of no return, and he sees it. And he makes an interesting statement while he's hanging there. He's asking his Father now to forgive them because they don't know what they're doing. Mm-hmm. And it's almost like the roles have been maybe reversed a little bit. In the garden, he's like, hey, let's find another way, Father. And then he gets on the cross, and all of the heavenly hosts are seeing the suffering, and maybe he's picking up, I don't know, maybe he's picking up on that, and he's like, uh-oh, Father, please forgive him. This. Let's finish this. We've gotten this far. Let's carry it out. And I'm thinking about that in terms of leaders making hard choices, sacrificing themselves. Sometimes, at least in Jesus' case, he absolutely sacrificed himself. So, takeaway there. I want you to talk a little bit about, because you mentioned some of this in your book, church eldership, leadership in the church, and in a culture that we are in today, where there just seems to be so much junk being pushed on elders, like, let's do this, let's change this, it's going to bring more people, let's re-examine doctrine on some of these issues, because culture doesn't agree with that doctrine anymore, and we're losing people or whatever. And so there's this intense pressure for church leadership to succumb to the culture, to succumb to society. How is that viewed then in the context of what Jesus did and what good leaders do when all the pressure comes on them?
So I'll try my best to kind of pull several threads, if we can, together. For Jesus, you go back to your description or the question and comments about servant leadership. Mm-hmm. For Jesus, servant leadership was about putting the kingdom and others above himself, and the epitome of that is the cross. Mm-hmm. His willingness to forgive. He is putting the needs of those at the foot of the cross over his own needs. Mm-hmm. We might be tempted. We would have felt the need for revenge. I can imagine myself. I can't actually. Let me rephrase. I can't imagine what he went through.
Yeah.
But I suspicion, if I could, as they're spitting on me, I would want to use my power for the nails to pull out of the cross. I levitate above the cross, and then those nails spin on an axis, and and 4 soldiers fall dead.
Yeah.
But he didn't. Servant leaders are always thinking about what's best for the kingdom and what's best for the people.
Yeah.
And it's a contrast. We've fallen into this boardroom mentality, mm-hmm. and we've fallen into this mentality that elders focus a lot of their attention on things that, to me, are more deacons' work.
Yeah.
We're talking about carpets and paint colors and those kind of nuts and bolts things. I'm not saying that none of those things matter, but they're not the weightier matters.
Is it shepherding?
And so shepherding, Jesus in John 10 talks about himself as the good shepherd. Mm-hmm. I think you're going to mention it later, but I'll go ahead and let the cat out of the bag. My favorite passage is 23rd Psalm. Mm-hmm. I think every elder has to know the 23rd Psalm. I think every elder needs to know John 10. And I think every church leader has to know Ephesians 4:11 through 16, because it gives us the purpose of teachers and leaders in the church. Yeah. But as we think about what we learn from Jesus, think about what you just said. The world and the culture, you've got to do this, you've got to make so-and-so happy, we've got to make the culture happy. This group doesn't like what we teach, this group doesn't like what we teach. It's a lot like Jesus, where everybody else had a plan for the Messiah. And he's like, well, God has a plan, and that's the plan I'm on.
Yeah.
So why does Jesus, for example, say to Peter, get behind me, Satan? Literally, if you go to the Greek and you compare to the Greek of Mark 8 with Matthew 4, he has the exact same phrase, except he adds a descriptor behind me. In Matthew 4, he says, go away, Satan.
Mm-hmm.
And then in Mark, when he's talking to Peter, he says, go away, Satan. He just adds the behind me.
Yeah.
So he literally says the same thing to Simon Peter that he said to the devil. Why? Well, remember, he said to Simon Peter, you're focused on the things of man, you're not focused on the things of God. Mm-hmm. I'm here on Father business, you're doing Satan business.
Yeah.
You're trying to get me to take the path he wanted me to take.
Yep.
So he's always running into these people, the religious leaders, the common people, even his own apostles. You know, as he's about to go back into heaven, is now when you're going to restore the kingdom, they still are wrestling with this earthly concept of the king and kingdom. And so leaders, we have to remember who we answer to as God. When I came to Heritage, I talked about 3 priorities. God, church, students. God, church, students. God, church, students. What we do has to honor God. We exist as a school to serve the church. The churches don't exist to serve us. We exist to help prepare ministers to serve the churches. When we forget that, we will lose our mission and cease. We may continue to exist, but we lose a higher purpose that we live by. And then what's best for our students. A lot of schools, they do what is best for the admissions department or the business department. At the end of the day, it's about God, church, students. So elders have to have that clear sense of what we do has to honor God and be what's best for him and his kingdom and what's best for the people. Right. And Jesus, it was about relationships. At the end of the day, leadership is about relationship. And so Jesus is in people's boats. Mm-hmm. He's in people's homes. He's walking their streets. He didn't sit back in a room and just make decisions. He went to where people were. He stopped at their tax collectors' booths. And I think that would be one of the message for us as leaders. We need to spend less time in boardrooms and more time in hospital waiting rooms.
Yeah, reminds me of the passage where we know his voice because why? He's spending time with us. He's not closeted up. Last question that I've got for you: how can thinking about the pressure of leaders and some of the things that a lot of church elders today are facing, how can leaders, specifically elders and deacons and ministers too, we're in that category, protect themselves from pride and burnout while still maintaining that sacrificial servant heart?
I do think one of the things that helps with pride is to look at Jesus. When I get, first of all, also having people in your life, having people around you that love you enough to say,
keep you humble.
Yes. Now, like my wife, I'm usually on the other end of the spectrum. We all struggle with pride, so I definitely have that issue. If she were here, she'd say, yeah, he can fight. He is. But she's usually more worried about me being broken and trying to pick me up. Mm. But if you've got somebody that really loves you and knows you, they know when those moments where they need to say, it's not about you. Yeah. And those moments when they are able to say, it's about him, but he's using you. Right. You're going to be all right.
Right.
So I think, first of all, for me, having people in your life who love you enough to tell you when you're getting too high and mighty, if that makes any sense. Yeah. I think looking at spending a lot of time reading our scriptures, one of my concerns with church leaders is I don't know how much time we're spending in the Word of God. Mm-hmm. Think about that emphasis in Titus when he's talking about the characteristics of elders holding fast to the faithful word. The more I spend time in Scripture, the more time I spend in the presence of Jesus, it's really hard to be arrogant.
Yeah.
And it's also, like when I'm discouraged, so when I'm feeling too full of myself, go read the cross. Go read the garden and the crucifixion.
Mm-hmm.
When I'm broken, go read any of the prophets. And then I'm like, I've had a better day than Jeremiah. I'm not as bad. Prophets, I mean, they had a rough.
They did.
And so I think Scripture for me helps a lot. Just doing that. And I just have to remind myself, it's not about us. What I've tried to do, and I'm speaking, a lot of things I do as a leader, I'm really talking to myself, and you can listen in if you want to.
Mm-hmm.
But at Heritage, I decided when I got there that I was going to do everything in my power not to talk about what we're doing, but what God is doing. So here's what God has done with us. Here's what God has done in our work. And we've got a guy, someone had written a history of the IBC years at Heritage. Mm-hmm. But we've been under the name Heritage for 24 years now. And so there is someone, I think, who is going to do a follow-up history. It'll touch back into the IBC years but carry us forward. And so I was on the phone talking to him about that process, and I said, my only request in that is that you make God the hero. Mm-hmm. Because God, everything that's happened here is not about any of us.
Right.
And so I think we just have to make sure our language is God-centered.
Yeah.
And in that process, others are hearing it, but I'm really reminding myself, because if it's not for him, I don't get to see any of this. And so I've had a prayer I've been praying the last couple of years, even as I was announcing my transition back to the classroom. I've prayed the last few years, thank you, God, for letting me stand on the shore. Mm. I feel like the children of Israel, when he parted the sea, had nothing to do with the parting. We're just standing there watching it part.
Right.
He didn't have to part seas and do the things he's done while I've been president. He could have done it in the future. He could have done it in the past. But he let me stand on the shore. And so I have multiple times thanked him for letting me get to see this firsthand.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's just a reminder, an attitude. But at the end, I think Jesus, it's all about Christ.
Yeah.
And I think the more leaders know Jesus, the better we make decisions.
Yeah.
The better we encourage, the better we deal with the highs and the lows.
Yeah. That's all of that's very powerful stuff. Unfortunately, we're out of time.
Okay, sorry,
but no, that's fine. I need to have you back so we can talk more about bees and Scripture.
Okay, that would be unbelievable.
Oh man,
sorry about my
that's a
bee
dad
puns.
pun right there.
I have a long line of bee puns.
I bet you do. So close us out with Psalms 23, and give us a little like the 30-second, 1-minute elevator spiel on, because we've got listeners that don't know anything about Heritage University. So,
well, my favorite passage is Psalm 23, and at the heart of that is I'm walking through life with my Lord, and from a leader perspective, it's all if you go through that, it's about the shepherd provides for everything the sheep needs, and the sheep relies on the shepherd. And so just reminding me that I rely on God for everything I have, but as I lead others, they should be able to rely on God first and foremost, but they should also believe that I'm going to try to protect them. I'm going to try to lead them beside still waters. I'm going to try to help them to have the food that they need spiritually to grow. Yeah. So it teaches me to rely on God, reminds me to rely on God, and it reminds me of the kind of leader I need to be, because Jesus was the good shepherd. Yeah. So Heritage Christian University was started in 1968, and I say making ministers is our ministry. Our mission statement says Heritage Christian exists to advance the churches of Christ by training servants for real-world ministry with an emphasis on evangelism and a commitment to Scripture. So we do accredited degrees, associates, bachelors, and masters. We're planning in the next few years to start a doctorate of ministry program. All our students are Bible majors. All our degrees are Bible ministry and theology degrees. You can study on campus with us in Florence, Alabama, or you can study online from anywhere in the world. We do We have full tuition scholarships for those who come to campus. We have full tuition scholarships for those who are doing master's degrees. We have full tuition scholarships for those who are from a preaching school that want to complete that as a bachelor's program, and then everybody else gets at least 50% scholarships. So our goal is that you have the best training possible, because we are trying to serve the church and save the world and help the church as we fulfill God's mission. But we would like those students to walk across the stage without a mountain of debt. I was tired of having students who owed $40,000, $50,000, $60,000. So last year, 87% of our students that walk across the stage, we had 32 graduates, all Bible majors, who didn't borrow anything for their degree. And many of those who borrowed had already paid it off by the time they graduated.
It's breaking the mold.
So that's we're unique. I think I don't know of a school that's necessarily doing all those things, but God's been really good to us.
Yeah, good stuff. All right, folks. If you are enjoying what you're hearing or seeing, if you're watching on our YouTube, like and subscribe this. We're always open to emails. If you've got suggestions about some podcasts that you would like us to address specifically, thelionthewayandthewar@gmail.com is where we will see those emails and answer them. Also, just a quick shout out to our sponsors, Central Church of Christ here in Chattanooga. We're in the process of, we got big things ahead of us. We're going to be unveiling a new studio at some point in the near future. So that's exciting. Ministry League, a great app. If you haven't downloaded it, you can see the QR code there on your screen. They are one of our sponsors, and you're not going to go wrong if you need a one-stop shop for a lot of different stuff. So Ministry League, check them out. Also, out of this studio and soon to be our new studio, our other podcast, Digging Deeper. That is following the lesson every Sunday, so I get critiqued and always keeps me on my A game to hear folks talk about the breakdown of my lesson every Sunday. So that airs on every Monday following the lesson. Until our next podcast of The Lion, the Way, and the War, love one another, be kind to one another, and remember that the Creator of the universe loves you so much that He gave up His only Son for you. Have a blessed day.